Okay, let's start with what you remember, stories you've heard about, what you know about the people that raised your father. They were the Joneses.
Yeah, well, see, that has to bring his mother in.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even know her name,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't Joan. I think the right name of the guy that was my dad's father was Davis. And my dad's right name was Clarence Davis. His mother was a streetwalker.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't want my dad, but he slipped up on her, I guess, in one of her drunken moods. Anyway, she'd go off and leave. So this old woman lived up the street was named Jones.
Mm-hmm.
So she found out how Dad was being treated, and she decided to go down and get Dad and bring him home, clean him up. There wasn't nobody in the house. She just walked in, got him, walked out. I don't know how long she kept him, but anyway, that got to be a regular habit, going down there and, you might well say, rescuing Dad.
Mm-hmm.
So finally, after so long a time, she told my dad's mother, Miss Jones told my dad's mother that she was going to take that kid down to her house and keep him if she wasn't going to do no better for him than that. And her remark was, I don't give a damn, I didn't want the little bastard anyway. So my dad, Miss Jones took my dad down to raise him. Well, old Pop Jones, he was a mean old son of a buck, and no doubt he drank too.
Now that was her husband.
That was Miss
Jones'
Jones'
husband. Mm-hmm.
But he was mean. And he took, I guess you call it baling wire, was that heavy wire, about 1/8 of an inch thick. He took a bunch of it and folded it in half. Then he took another piece and wrapped around and made a handle. And when my dad would do something, of course this must have been years later,
Mm-hmm.
when Dad would do something that he didn't like, he'd take that thing and whoop him across his back. He had those scars till the day he went to the grave. So he stayed with them until he was about 14, and then he run off. Where he stayed, where he went, I don't know. Maybe that's where this Urell, Pete Urell, that we went to see. You know, I was about 10 years old then, but went to see Pete Urell, and there's 3 or 4 or 5 of them there. They all knowed him. And he went up there, was in Campbellsville, and went up there to see them, and visited around with all of them for maybe we was up there a week. And they had a farm, but we got there just after the drought had set in, and they had sold all their sheep, whatever they had because of the drought. They didn't have no water. So then we came back, and we lived on Market Street in Louisville then. Now I'm way up 10 years old, and I done skipped 10 years.
Well, that's okay. Let me ask something. You said that Pete Urell, your understanding was he might have been your dad's stepfather.
No.
No?
No. I think they was just some people that took him in when he
Okay.
run off from old Pop Jones and
Okay.
raised
And
him
helped
for
raise
a
him.
few years
Okay.
until he decided to come back to Louisville on his own.
I gotcha. Okay. Let me go back and clarify one thing. So your father, his given name at birth was Clarence Davis.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when the Joneses took him in, they named him.
They didn't name him. He named himself.
He named himself.
When he went to get married, he went to Ma Jones and he says, Ma, I want to ask you something. Should I call myself Joe Jones when I get married, or should I call myself Clarence Davis? She said, well, it's you. It's your name. You do anything you want to. Call yourself Bozo the Clown, or, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So he called himself Joseph Jones. He didn't have no middle name.
Okay. He called himself
Joseph.
Joseph
So
Jones.
everybody called him Joe.
Okay. Okay.
Now,
Okay, so you say that your dad has not told a lot of stories about it, like he didn't talk much when you were coming up.
he didn't talk about his people at all. Only thing he ever said to me, I come in one time and he wouldn't take his shirt off, show his upper body to nobody.
Because of the scars.
Yeah, and I come in one day and he was shaving and he had his shirt off. And his back was full of marks. I said, my God, Dad, what happened to your back? Oh, he said, that's where old Pop Jones whooped me.
And that's all
That's all
he ever said.
And I was scared to say anymore to him because it seemed like it kind of irked him, made him mad. And I didn't want to get him mad.
Yeah.
Because he
Had temper.
he was rough. when he
Now,
got-
did he ever talk about just himself, any things he did in his younger years? Not about his folks, but about himself. Did he say what he did as a young man before he got married? Did he ever?
Well, he lived from hand to mouth. He even eat out of garbage, got stuff out of garbage cans and eat it.
Did he always live in Louisville? I mean,
That I don't know. He went, I heard him talking about after him and Mom was married, he went to Firestone in Dayton, Ohio, I guess. Is that where it's at?
there might be one there. The home office is in Akron.
Or it might have been Akron.
Okay.
And while he was in Akron, he got acquainted with Fred Arnold. He took him in, gave him a place to stay, and got him a job at Firestone. And he used to call him Kid. And for a few years, until Dad, that drinking got the best of Dad, he used to come and see him and Mom. But Dad got like myself, he got toward a few drinks, and he was blotto. He didn't know telling what he'd do next.
So he didn't come and visit then.
Well, he stopped coming around, yeah. He might have died, I don't know. He came from Indiana. What's the name of that? Oh, I can't think of the name of the town. We come to it though when we go down to Irvin's, when we come down 41 or 63 down.
Mm-hmm.
It's right on the border, Bernard. I can't think. I can't think of it right now.
So,
I think
did he ever tell any other stories? This is before he was married. What you just said was before he was married.
No, he was married.
He was married to.
And after he got set up, Fred Arnold helped him to find a place, a furnished room or two. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Mom told me this. She went up there, and Walter was born.
You mean went to where he was working in for Firestone?
Yeah, he went up there, yeah, from Louisville.
Uh-huh. And your mom eventually went with him?
She went up there. He
Uh-huh.
sent for her, and she went up on the train.
Right.
And she went to work, and she got some people to they babysat for him. And They just begged Mom to give Walter to them, but she never would. She didn't do it.
Any idea what year that would have been? Do you remember?
Oh man, now you are really asking.
No, okay.
I have no idea, but I'm satisfied it was before World War I.
Yeah, I remember your mom was born. She was 1 year older than the year, so she was born in 1899, I believe.
You know more than I know. She's probably told me, but I didn't remember.
I just remember that she was always, it seemed to me, a year older than whatever the year was.
Yeah.
In 85,
well,
she was 86.
Just like I was born 1920, so whatever the year is, you take 20 off of, and that's my age. Like I'm 72, 82, 92.
Well, what do you remember about your mother's side of the family?
Well, it was Ma and Pa.
Okay, so what do you remember about
I'll start off by talking about Tricky Tom.
Tricky
my
Tom?
grandpa.
That's your grandpa, your mom.
His name was William T. Allen, and everybody called him Tricky Tom because he had a few tricks up his sleeve when he was a younger man.
Now this is your mom's father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Earliest I remember, Mom told me this, and Paul, anyway, the earliest I remember, he worked at a safe factory down in Louisville. And now see, this is where I don't. He met Ma at a tent meeting. You know, they used to have the old time tent
revival, religious revival meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In Hardin County,
Kentucky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Uncle Jerry, that was my grandma's brother,
Mm-hmm.
he was the bully of them parts. So Paul got to come squiring. I guess that's what he called it. Anyway, he got to going with my grandma, and Uncle Jerry called him out front, and he told him, he said, Tom, if I catch you with...
Okay.
Uncle Jerry, he looked my grandpa, and he told him, he says, Tom, I'm going to tell you on one time, if I catch you with Lottie, my grandma's name was Charlotte, they called her Lottie. If I catch you with Lottie one more time after the night, I'm going to whale a tire out of you. So my grandpa said, well, you're going to see me. But from what I can get by reading between the lines, my grandpa was a pretty heavy drinker and was kind of rough too.
Mm-hmm.
And he carried a straight razor. Anyhow, next night, my grandpa come down there. Well, that must have been after church that he told my pa that. But anyway, my pa walked her home. So the next night, here come my pa. And he walked in and sat down by my grandma. And Uncle Jerry told him, he says, come outside, I want to talk to you. So my grandpa got up and walked outside. So they went at it, hand to hand. So Uncle Jerry knocked my grandpa over a barbed wire fence. But he made one mistake. He went over it after him. By the time he got over there, my grandpa had his knife, razor out, and he just cut him all to pieces. In fact, they didn't think for a long time they was going to live. So that's all I can tell you about that, because my grandpa probably run before the sheriff would get him and went to Louisville, I guess. But anyway, him and Grandma wound up married. And there's two that Grandma and Grandpa didn't talk to me about their past lives.
Now, is your grandpa, the one they always refer to as Paul Allen? Paul Allen.
He was a preacher for 13 years, too. He was apostolic.
And he also, you said, worked in a
Safe factory.
safe factory where they make safes.
Yeah, the old-time safes.
The big combination ones.
Well, I suppose they made other stuff too, but they called it a safe factory because that was their main product.
Now, what was your grandma's maiden name? You said she was Charlotta?
Her name was Charlotta Devine.
Devine was her maiden name.
Yeah.
Devine. Any other stories you remember anybody telling about them? How old were you when they died? Do you remember them, much of them?
My grandpa didn't die until up in the 50s.
Oh, so you were an adult.
Yeah. My grandma, she died when I was about 12 or 13 years old.
Do you have any memories of her?
Oh, yeah.
What do you remember?
Well, you don't want the rest of what, Paul?
Sure.
You can say.
Either one.
Well, my grandma, she lived, finally, my uncle built a house. It was a 3-room house. Yeah, 3-room house out in Butte Arts Addition. They called it. It's Vim Drive now. Well, my grandma and grandpa, he took them in and let them live in one part. But there's a lot behind this that I forgot. Anyway, I'll go. And they lived out there with them. And I used to go every summer. As soon as school was out, I'd go. A lot of times I'd take a pair of pants and a shirt and head out to their house, which was about 10 or 12 miles. Yes, somebody would give me a dime. Mom would give me a dime for car fare. Well, I guess Dad was glad to get rid of me. I don't know. Well, I ain't going to say that because I don't know for sure. And my Dad's got enough on him anyway to answer for. But anyhow, I got my grandma's and stay because I like Dealey, Georgie, Viola, Little Edward, Irvin. That ain't in the chronological order.
These are your cousins?
But yeah, but I played with them all the time.
Out there?
And me and Irvin used to go and steal corn out of old man Croups' patch. But my grandma, she would take care of, she took care of me all summer. And around September, when you had to go back to school, well, I'd have to go home about a week early.
So if they were your cousins, how many brothers and sisters did your mom have?
The only sister that I know of that she had and brother was Jerry, which was Uncle Jerry, and Aunt Lorendi. They lived out at Tip Top, out around Fort Knox, I guess for years, and I don't know what happened, never heard, never seen nothing of them.
But all of these kids you mentioned come from those two.
From what
The two, the brother and the sister of your mom. Had Irv and...
Oh, you're getting all screwed up.
I must be.
They wasn't brother and sister to my mom. His brother, Jerry and Aunt Lorindy were, I don't know where Aunt Lorindy come from, but she married my Uncle Jerry Devine. That made her name Charlotte, and everybody called her Lottie Devine.
Okay.
And they had a passel of kids, I guess about 4 or 5. I don't remember all of them because I was too young on one trip that we went out there.
Hold on. Okay, let's go back. I got us off track a minute ago. Let's go back. Tell me who your mother's brothers were.
Okay, I'll tell you in what they call it, chronological order.
Okay.
Uncle Turner, that's Irvin Allen's dad,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
was the oldest brother.
Okay.
Then Uncle Lewis was the next oldest.
Mm-hmm.
He was married to a woman named Lil Pugh. And their names was Allen.
Okay.
And then there was Uncle Edward. He was the baby of the family. And he married a woman named Josephine. I can't think of her last name. She was a German.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was Mom. She was the young baby in the family.
Okay. Now you were, before we began, you were beginning to say some things about your uncles that you remembered.
Well, I could tell you a whole lot.
You may not want to
But
go.
we've done skipped about 30 years.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
because
let's go back to what you remember of, any more that you remember about your grandparents, Paul Allen and your grandma.
well, Grandpa, he used to push a push cart, junking, and make extra money. Now, that was after my grandmother had died.
Mhm.
And it's got to go back further than that. When I used to go out to them
Visit.
drive,
To visit in the summers.
you had to stay with them in the summer, all through the summer. He worked for him and Uncle Turner both worked for the state.
Okay.
They chopped kindling wood. And they got what they call scrip. And they used to go up to this store and get their stuff, and this scrip was same as money.
Okay.
So that's the way they lived on that. My Uncle Turner, he used to be a horse trader, I called him, and I wouldn't trade nothing with him because I know I was going to get the wrong end. Well, Irvin takes that to the same thing. That's his son.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Uncle Turner's wife's name was Grace Evans before she married him. But she washed clothes and ironed. And in fact, that's how she died. She was pregnant with turn that off. Washing and ironing for a living. And she was going out to the well to get a bucket of water, I think, or take some clothes out to put on the line. It was in the wintertime. And there was ice on the steps, and she slipped and fell. And that's what killed her. But the baby was born, and my uncle Turner gave the baby to this John Guess.
Mm-hmm.
And still, she lives in Louisville somewhere now. Her husband just recently died. And I never seen her until I started going back to see Irvin this last time. It's the first time, because we went up there to see, well, she got another, Uncle Turner's kids were named Irvin, Dealey, Georgia May, Viola, and then this one, that's her name? Margaret.
Mm-hmm.
Margaret, and a little boy named Edward. He died. He fell over on a hot stove and cooked his guts before they could get him off.
Now, who raised Irv and the other ones after the baby died?
After
his mother died,
Aunt Grace died, he handed them out to anybody wanted them. Say, for instance, he'd have known you, and you'd have said, Turner, how about letting me raise Dealey, Georgia, or whichever one?
He'd say, okay.
Sure, he didn't try to keep them together or nothing. Anyway, my Uncle Lewis, he goes way back there. He was married to Lil, and then not very long, and him and her got a divorce. And he made a career out of drinking. Most I remember about him, he stayed with us. In fact, he stayed the last 5 or 6 years that he lived with us, maybe longer. But he died of tuberculosis. He'd go out and get drunk and fall down and snow, or it would snow on him, cover him up. My Uncle Edward, he worked for Kleinstrubers all during, well, not all during the war, but part of the war, and he had a guy on one, they was working on a Saturday. This one guy's supposed to stay outside. My uncle, he used to whistle all the time he worked. If he stopped whistling, he was supposed to go up and look down in the boiler and see if there's anything wrong with my uncle. Mm-hmm. Well, they was both drinking, and this guy, he decided to go down the corner and get a 6-pack of beer. So while he was gone, he passed out. He must have hit his head. They say he had a big knot on his head. He must have raised up and knocked himself out. So this guy came back. He didn't know where my uncle was, so he waited a few minutes. He thought he'd been to the toilet, but he waited long enough that he could have been back. So when he didn't, he went to the toilet. He wasn't there, and he came back, and he climbed up on this ladder, and the boiler was on an upright, you know, about 20, 25 feet tall. He climbed up there, and he looked down in there, and he seen my uncle. And the cutting torch was still going. So he run down and got help, I guess, and the fire engine department come. And they started pulling him out, and they had an old rope. And it broke and dropped him the second time. So they pulled him on out. Well, he was dead. They buried him. I was overseas in the Army.
Okay.
Now,
well, let me.
I don't know how to get it. Go ahead.
Let me go back a minute. We were talking a while back before we talked about uncles. We were talking about you going out to visit your grandparents when you were a boy, meeting your cousins out there. They'd come out too when you were a boy.
Come out.
Come out to your grandparents. Remember, you said you'd go in the
No,
summers.
they lived there.
No, you said you and your cousin. Oh, your cousins lived there.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
but
my
you go
grandma lived in one room that my uncle gave her.
Okay.
Let her have.
But you'd go out and visit also.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you said about when you were about 12, your grandma died.
Yeah.
And what did she die of?
Good Lord, I think they call it guitar. I've seen her take a hairpin, one of them old time forked
Mm-hmm.
that long and run up in her head. And there's somewhere to get stuff loosened up, pull out what she could with it, and then take water and snurf it up her nose and spit it out her mouth and spit that stuff out. And they called it catarrh.
Guitar.
Something eating in her head. And she finally went to General Hospital, and that's where she died.
She died in the hospital, but Paul Allen lived on.
Yeah.
Now, what do you remember about him? We talked about where that he worked and pushed the cart and extra money and so
Well,
forth. What else do you remember as you got older?
that happened after my grandma died. He just lived around first with one and then another. And he did get
Of his kids?
married.
Lived with his kids, you mean?
I think so. I'm not sure. I know he come and lived with Dad. In fact, well, I got out of CC's. He was living there with us. That was in 1938. He lived with us from 38 on
Okay.
until he died, 50
In
something.
the 50s. What kind of a person was he? What do you remember?
Jolly old man.
Was he?
Yeah, yeah. Like I say, he used to go to church pretty regular too, but he liked his beer. And he'd go up, and generally, everybody knowed him, they was in there, he'd get 2 or 3 or 4 beers, they'd just give them to him. And he'd get to feeling a little bit, and he'd head home and lay down and sleep it off. Then get up, and this woman, Miss Combs, would come up, help him get washed and dressed and take him to church, bring him home. Of course, she was younger than he was.
Did he ever remarry after your...
He remarried an old bag named Hutchison. And she had a boy by the name of Will Hutchison. But Paul would go out in wintertime, he'd go out junking, looking in garbage cans for metal and stuff that would sell. And in the summertime, he'd push a push cart. Klotz Ice Cream Company had wagons with 4 wheels on them and they special built. And they had ice in them. And he'd go out and sell that ice cream.
Ice cream.
And this Will Hudson, he'd go out and see where he could bum all he could drink, and then he'd come in. So this one night he came in, I guess Paul was a little extra tired. And he said, well, he said, thank the Lord, he will provide. And about that time, Paul hit him and knocked him across the room. Run him off, and then the old woman gave him a hard way, and he run her off too, and that was the end of that.
Of that marriage?
Yeah.
Did he ever
And
remarry?
He come back, I think, and stayed with Dad, or he went out to Uncle Turner's and lived out there and helped Uncle Turner.
Now, what did he die of, Paul Allen?
I could not tell you. I don't know. Old age. I
He would have
guess
been pretty
it was.
old.
He was 88.
88.
And
What do you remember of your grandmother? What kind of character was she?
she had very little to say.
Quiet.
I never remember seeing her without she had that handkerchief folded about that wide, come around her She pulled tight as she could, and I don't know if she would pin it herself or get my grandpa to. But she had them headaches. That's one thing about my Uncle Turner. He had, what do they call it, migraine?
Migraine headaches.
He had headaches all. He eat aspirins like they was going out of style.
So she was your grandma was a quiet person, and
She never talked about nobody. But she used to come over and talk to Mom, trying to get her to straighten up. Well, it just lose the battle.
to your mom.
My mom, yeah, her
Oh,
daughter.
I
her
see.
daughter.
When you mean as she
It's when she
tried to
come
get her
to
to straighten up
visit.
her drinking. Yeah.
She wasn't always drunk, Mom wasn't,
Mhm.
but she drank her share.
Well, was your grandmother? Do you remember her being a fairly kind person to the kids, to the grandkids, or did she even?
Well,
have anything
she
to do
was
with
kind of short-tempered, and the reason it was because them headaches
headaches?
that
Yeah. It got to her. Yeah.
Yeah, and if my grandpa would have, I never understood. They must have been awful ignorant, like me, because my grandpa should have took her to General Hospital and had her had seen they might have done something for that,
Mhm.
but never did. And of course, I was a kid; I didn't know nothing about it. But back then, you'd go to the General Hospital and they'd take care of you, put you in a hospital. They'd not even charge you a penny if you didn't have it. And your medication, you give them 35, 40 cents, and the medicine was yours. Or if you didn't have it, they'd just stamp it some way and give it to you anyway. And it was a good hospital. Of course, it was part of this Louisville Medical College in there,
Down in Louisville.
Yeah, and they shit, if I had it, I wished I was down there where I could go to it. But
Okay. What about Aunt Josephine? This was
Well,
Edward's, your
my
Uncle Edward's wife.
My Uncle Edward was working at Ertles Brewing Company. And anyway, he got to running around with George Devine, which was about a sixth cousin of his. Anyway, he took George in as a boarder. Well, George and Aunt Josephine got together pretty thick. Anyway, Uncle Lewis and George stole the 2 Model Ts, and they took them out to Butte Archdition, right out in the cornfield from where my grandma and them lived.
Mm-hmm.
And Effie's schemes called the police on them. What they was doing, they was wrecking one and putting it in the other and going to drive the whole works up on a scale and sell the whole business.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the police got them, and they got a year and a day in Eddyville, each one of them.
Who was that now that got the year and a day?
Both of them, George Devine and my Uncle Lewis.
Okay.
And Aunt Josephine used to write to George, my cousin. Well, he's sixth cousin, he's no kin.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, she'd write to him, and they was getting pretty horny in the letters. And my Uncle Lewis, Uncle Turner, found one of them, and that busted him and my Aunt Josephine up. So, anyhow, he remarried to Alma. I don't remember what Alma's last name was, but anyway, she was Alma Allen. And he had one kid by Aunt Josephine, her name was Dolores. She now, last I heard of her, I wrote her a letter, and she never did get another answer. But she got to writing to me and Mom pretty regular. Anyhow, she had Dolores, and Dolores would live part-time with my Aunt Josephine and part-time with my Uncle Ed. And he married this Alma Hall was her maiden name. But anyway, it's her name. She was out Alma Allen after Uncle Ed married her. And she had one kid by him. Stella.
Stella, I remember that name.
Well, she's still alive, and she lives down there in Louisville, someplace close to. Anyway, Alma goes to visit her, and she goes to visit Alma. That's her mother. And she herself has got a passel of kids and got one set of twins. So that's about all on that end of the deal. But
Well,
my uncle,
Which
I
one?
could tell you, he was on the police department.
Which uncle is that?
Uncle Edward.
Edward, okay.
I used to call him Uncle Ed.
Okay.
But he was on the
Police department in Louisville?
police department. And him and his buddy, they used to have a run up River Road round in that area there. And they used to catch a man and a woman in a car in the act of having a lot of fun. And one of them would take the man and off someplace and talk to him. And the other one would talk to the woman and proposition her, if you take me and my buddy on, we'll let you go. Generally would. And he shot a nigger in the heel, and he was bragging about all that. So I didn't think too much of. Well, I guess I didn't think too much of him and his way of operating. He also drove he drove the back end of a hooking ladder. Remember them?
Yeah.
Used to have a steering wheel on the back. We drove one of them. Uncle Lewis, he, when they had their strike in Louisville, a railroad company, he bought himself a gun and went and got a job, and he was on the interurban line running from Louisville to Indianapolis. You remember one of them?
Interurban?
Yeah, you don't remember
I
probably.
don't remember them, but I've heard of them. Mm-hmm.
Well, he was on them. And I think he fought around, finally got fired for drinking. Now,
Okay.
what have I left out?
Well, I think you've covered that. Let's go back to your mother. Do you remember any stories that she's told about being a girl or growing up? Or
She told some, but I'd have to sit down and think about it.
think about that? I think she was. I remember I believe she was born about 1899, and
She was born in Hardin County.
Kentucky.
But when they made the transition to Louisville, I don't know.
Now she was married very young.
14.
She was 14.
Dad was 21.
Okay. And
She married my dad, she said, in order to get something to eat and have a home. And I guess at first, because I can just barely remember, we had furniture and rugs on the floor and pretty nice home. Plenty of food. He was working at Pittsburgh Fuel Company. In 1929, the Depression hit. And Dad lost his job. Now that's the story. There's another story. The guy used to operate the crane down in Pittsburgh. He had a locker down there. inside. And he accused Dad of stealing his jewelry. And it could be so. My dad wouldn't talk about that either. But I think he got fired over that. From then on, he just was going on. That's when he was on his way down. When he lost out at Pittsburgh, why, he just kept going down.
I mean, that's when he started his...
Well, he was drinking before that, but that's when it was getting a hold of him.
Mm.
So he was doing things that he wouldn't ordinarily do when he's sober.
Okay, so your mom was 14. That would have been about 1913, and then a couple of years later, she would have had Walt.
What are you talking about, 1913?
That would have been about the time she got married. 1913, 1914, sometime in there.
Walter was born in 1960.
So they would have been married maybe about 2 years before, a year or two before he was born.
1960? No, he was born in 1970. No. I was born in 1920.
And he's 4 years older?
Well, not to the mid.
Not to the day.
He was born July 29th, and I was born January 29th.
Okay. But anyway, he was born a couple of years after they were married.
I guess.
And then you were born in
But she had two. One of them was stillborn, and the other one lived about 6 weeks and died.
Before-
2 girls.
before Walt.
That I don't know. One was between me and Walt. And I think one was before. I don't know, or it might have been after me. So I don't really know on that score.
You said she told you she got married to have something to eat. Well, her family was pretty poor then, huh?
My grandpa was poor all right. He used to tell a story. He said that there was a man lived down in Hardin County, and he told this for a true story, see. And he said this guy, his wife, washed and ironed from daylight to dark, took care of him and passed of the kids. And they had at that time what was called vigilantes, or Ku Klux Klan. So while she was washing and ironing, he'd sit out under a tree and saw on an old fiddle. So these, what do you call them?
Vigilantes.
Vigilantes got together and had a meeting one night. One of them said, what about that, we didn't call him no name, but he said, what about that guy up there? Says, he ain't doing a thing. Said, and his poor wife is working herself to death, and said all he's good for is to saw on that old fiddle and make babies. What are we going to do about him? Well, a bunch of them was all in for tar and feathering him and riding him out of town right then. And one guy said, no, I said, I'll tell you. He said, let's give him another chance. He says, I'll give a wagon load of corn if somebody will furnish a wagon. Well, another guy said, I'll furnish a wagon. So 2 or 3 of these guys, they loaded up that wagon and took it up there and told him, says, now look, you sitting on your bucket here sawing on that fiddle and your poor old wife's over there just working herself to death in order to take care of you and them kids. And we ain't stopping. We got a wagon load of corn out here, and we're going to give it to you to give you a start. Well, he said, that's right neighborly of you folks. He says, one question I want to ask you. It's still sitting in the tree. What's that? Is it shucked? He never said what they done to him or what happened to him or anything after that. That's as far as he went. And I often wonder if he wasn't telling that on himself. Because I don't remember him having any job except, like I say, working for this county or city or whatever it was for that script. And when talking about working at this Hiram's Safe Factory or something like that in Louisville.
But they were poor.
Poor? I reckon. I don't even think they had a rug on their floor.
Do you remember any stories your mother ever told of being a little girl, or anything she ever happened to, anything that stands out about in her memory that she passed
No,
on?
I don't. She talked about being a tomboy, playing with my uncles, their brothers.
Had all brothers.
Climbing trees and riding on Uncle Turner's back and things like that. And she went to Episcopalian church down in the West End. Now see, that's something else I can't understand, how they moved back and forth. Because the best they could do was hire somebody to haul them in a horse and wagon. I remember Dad was talking about during the First World War, he was driving a truck, wagon, and hauling food down to Fort Knox for the soldiers. And I suppose it took him all day, and he had to get up way before daylight to do that. What is that, about 40 miles? But anyway, he was riding out there, and the sun was coming down hot and everything. And then without thinking, he was hungry. So they had the barrels of peanut butter. So he just took the lid off and reached down, got him a big handful, put the lid back, got him a big mouthful, and like choked before he could get over into the ditch and get him some water. I heard him talk about that. Heard him talking about, he started out with old man Slider, E.T. Slider. I never did know what that E.T. stood for. Anyway, E.T. Slider started out, and he had him a billy goat and a wagon, or 2 goats and a wagon, or whatever it was to pull it. And he'd go up and down the railroads and pick up coal. And he had some place he stored it. I guess he owned the property. But he would he'd do that all summer, maybe in the wintertime too, I don't know. And I wouldn't doubt he didn't jump up on the cars and throw a few lumps off there too. But anyway, he finally got started pretty good, so he hired Dad. He bought another billy goat and wagon and hired Dad to go. Well, then that away in the wintertime, he was delivering, and Dad was out picking up his coal off the railroad. Then he got them old, you don't remember them, I know, but they had a dump wagon that they hauled coal in, had mules pulling. And I heard him tell them about this Maggie and Jiggs. It was a team of mules. And he was going up the street, and he said them things, they was the contrariest mules he ever seen. And he said one of them would sit down. I forget which one he says. But anyway, he'd sit down, and he'd have to get out there, and he'd take his fist and hit him, and do everything he could till he finally get him up and get him going. Well, one day they sat down on him. When one sat down, they both sat down. So anyway, I guess this one was got up on its feet. He got him up, and he was trying to get the other one up. And he was just about wore out and disgusted. And he had his handkerchief out wiping his face. And he said, some old man come along and said, "What's the matter, son? You having trouble with them mules?" Dad cussed up a storm. "Yeah," he says, "I can't get this SB up off his butt for heck." He said, "Take your reins and get up there in the seat." He said, "I'll get him up for you." Dad said, "Well, all right, have a try." And he said, "I'm done wore myself out getting him up." Now, I don't know whether the wagon was loaded or unloaded. But anyway, Dad got up there and this old man said, "You ready now?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay." He just reached down and got a handful of dust. Got that old mule. He was talking to the mule all the time. And he got that... The mule come up out of there shaking his head and started running. The other started running with him. And they tore up, I don't know, 2 or 3 old cars, old Model Ts, cars they had then.
Mm-hmm.
But he said he remembered that and said from then on, so that old mule would sit down and said he'd get out there and get in front of him and say, "Now you son of a buck, are you going to get up or not?" He man. He said that mule see that handful of dust, he'd come up right now. He said, "You go around and get on and say, down, no more trouble."
Well,
What?
Are you still taping?
Yeah.
okay, well, let's come up to the point now where you're born. You were born in, your birthday is January
29th, 1920.
1920.
And that's debatable anymore. This poor mom died. She said she went to the hospital on the 29th, and I was born at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I said, "Well, I said, you mean you went that early in the morning?" She said, "No," says, "I went there in the evening." And I labored until 3 in the morning, so. Anyway, my birth certificate's got the 30th.
Your birth certificate has the 30th, but you've always celebrated on the 29th.
29th, right.
Okay. Okay.
Now, where was I at?
Well, that's where we were. You were born. And what are some of your first recollections?
Well, I'm trying to think. I was born on Shelby Street, 131 North Shelby,
In Louisville?
in Louisville, Kentucky.
Were you born in the house? I mean, I know you don't remember that, but I mean...
I wouldn't craft on the snow.
Well, I mean, you weren't born in the hospital.
I don't know if,
I don't think people were much back then. I think most people were born.
I don't know if she had a midwife or not.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't.
But you were born in the
But
house.
no, it wasn't. Because they said old Dr. Milton, I think she called him, came to the house, and I was born at home.
Mm-hmm.
They used to come then, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, born in the house there on Shelby Street. The earliest that I remember, I can remember other things. I remember one time we lived on Main Street, west of Shelby Street on Main. And I was looking out the window and I seen a gal going across the street, a woman. And I come out and I don't remember this as I'm telling it, but this is the sequence. What I remember was seeing the gal go across the street. I come out and I told Mom, Grandma was there. I said, "Put my clothes on, I want to go see my girlfriend." So they thought, just a kid. I was going outside to play. So they put my clothes on, and next thing you know, they had to look for me. I wasn't in the yard. Well, they finally tracked me down. I was at that firehouse at Shelby, Maine there, sitting up on that hook and ladder. Them firemen had me. And anyway, somehow or another, this cop, he spotted Mom and brought her up there to get me, and I was in the firehouse. And so she brought me home from that. The next thing I remember, a little bit of. Oh, you wasted film on her. That
No.
messes me up.
That's okay. Plenty of film. Well, how old were you when when that happened?
I don't remember. About 6 years old, Mom said.
About 6 years old, wasn't
Well, and the next thing I remember was living on Shelby Street. And let's see, I remember that it was still during the Depression, the height of it, I guess. But Salvation Army had a mission over there. And I remember people used to go down to Volunteers of America and they'd get bread and milk, bowl of soup, and hear the sermon. And I remember old man Floyd had a radio, and people came from miles around to hear that thing. And what it was an Atwater Kent, and had one of them gooseneck horn speaker on.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing was about that long and about that wide, and it had them tuning coils all in it. And of course at the time I didn't know what it was, but I know I used to go over and try to listen to it. And then in the bottom they had them Leyden jars, glass Leyden jars for power. And he'd play it for people, to hear. And if he got Cincinnati, hey man, you ought to hear him. Everybody got quiet
Uh-huh.
and they'd listen to it.
What kind of things did they play on the radio back then?
Now I don't remember that.
Music? Okay.
Gary.
I mean, I just wonder whether it was music or talk.
No,
People
I don't know.
talking.
It was programs, I guess.
Program.
Like they had Amos and Andy.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
they
That
was
kind.
one. I think the Mills Brothers.
Yeah.
Different ones like that.
Right.
These people would come at the same time. Every time they was on, I think the Mills Brothers was on about 5 or 6 nights a week. Same thing with Amos and Andy.
Yeah, your family.
McGee and Molly
Yeah, Fibber McGee.
and Molly. Yeah.
And your family would not have had a radio.
Are you kidding? We never even owned a crystal set after people started making them.
Yeah.
Irvin, he somehow he finagled around and got him an oatmeal box and some wire and stuff and made him one. But we never did have one, and I guess the first one we ever had was when we lived on Clay Street up over Grace, 131 North Clay. But I remember I was going down the street there one morning, barefoot. I was going over on Camel Street to play with that bunch of guys. And there's a sack laying in the middle of the sidewalk. And I thought, boy, I'll just keep that wad out of that sack. And pow! Oh, it's a wonder I didn't break my foot. Some son of a buck had put a brick in it. And I kicked it, and that toenail is still kind of odd shaped. It's pinched in.
Mm-hmm.
And this Zelma Bennett, I think she's the one that done it. Because while I was stooping over, rubbing my toe, she come up and kicked me right in the bag. And I fell over, and that like to kill me. And she run. And I took off after her. She stood there and laughed at me while I was laying there. I don't know if I was rubbing myself or what. Directly I got up and I chased her, and I'd have beat the shit right out. But her mother standing in the yard, and she seen me chasing her, and she stopped me. Now, what else do I remember about that?
What about when did you start to school?
First school started to with Miss Beaches there on River Road. It was a little old kindergarten or preschool or some kind of thing.
What do you remember about what are your memories of school back in?
I remember she had something, had it on her lap, had the kids all around her. She was showing things. Other kids was reaching in and getting stuff. And I reached in and got something. And she grabbed my hand, turned it back, and took a root on it. Boy, she just waved the tar out of my hand. I finally pulled it loose. And I cussed her. I went out the door and went home. I don't know what happened then, but Mom asked, I just lived next door to her. Mom asked me why I was home, and I told her. But she says if the rest of them was, she said you must have been doing something bad, because she wouldn't have whooped your hand for just that. Well, you know, that's the way the story of my life. I was lying. They wouldn't do it.
Did you ever find out why you were hit on the hand?
Yeah, for reaching in there and getting it. I guess I was oddball or something. Or she just didn't like me, or she wanted a chance to wave the tar out of me or something. And I remember there used to be a colored couple lived in the back of there, and they used to fix sandwiches and bring them up. Glass of milk, peanut butter jelly, and wheat bread.
Mm-hmm.
They might have brought up bowls of soup too. Seems to me like I remember. But what they taught us in school, I don't know. It seemed to me like it was cutting out stuff like they do in them schools.
Now, did you start to high school? You went to high school. You started high school, didn't you? You went to, I thought...
8th grade.
8th grade?
Junior high.
You finished the 8th grade?
No. Yeah, I finished.
8th grade.
But I passed. When I passed out. I didn't go back no more.
You didn't go back to the 9th grade?
No.
Into high school?
Didn't go at all.
Now, that would have been about 19...
But that was a Lower Fulton school, Miss Beaches.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them call it Miss Beaches School.
Mm-hmm.
I went from there, I went to Hein Roberts on Market Street between Clay and Hancock. And I got expelled from there because I lived across the street and I was late every morning. Because Dad would wake me up at 4:30 in the morning when the rolling mill would blow their horn.
Right.
And I'd eat breakfast and have nothing to do, so I'd take off and I'd go around the point and get with them guys and be late when I got to school.
So they kicked you out.
So they kicked me out. But while I was going there, I was in the 5th grade. Now, I don't know how old that would have made me.
10 or so.
Yeah. But anyway, they sent me up to Mercer and set me back a grade. Getting ahead of myself. Miss Mundy, I was in her room, and she asked me one morning, she says, William, would you like to learn to play an instrument? I said, well, yeah, like any kid, you know. Yeah. What instrument would you like to play? Well, I didn't know. I don't know. So I think you'd make a good trumpet player. So she gave me a cornet, what it was. She said, now, William, whatever you do before you put your mouth on this and blow it, you be sure and wash your mouth out good with water and be sure there's no bread, especially bread, in your mouth or anything else. And then you blow it. And then she told me some of the notes.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay. So I went home with it and I put it under the bed. I went out to play. Next day I took it back in. Miss Monday says, well, William, what do you think of that horn? I said, it's a fine instrument. She said, well, show me what you learned. Oh, she had me in the middle because I hadn't even, shit, I went at it.
Right.
I didn't have time for that. So she seen and probably figured what happened. So anyway, she took it out of the case. She says, here, I'll show you some things. So she said, and I could see her jaws going, and then blowed her ears out, you know. What have you done to this instrument? I said, I ain't done nothing. As far as I know, it was never out from under the bed. Well, she sent it to have it cleaned. And they found a piece of bread. He brought it back as evidence and showed it to me. And took it away, and that was the end of my musical career.
And what had happened?
Walter had got it out and was eating a sandwich and blowing it until he couldn't blow it no more.
Oh, that
So
was...
he didn't tell me about that until I don't know how long was it.
So you never knew for a long time.
Didn't know it.
So why after the 8th grade, why didn't you go on? Why did you stop to work? Was it...
Now we went back up again. One day I came home from school and at night Dad told me, he said, tomorrow I want you to come over to the coal yard. Put on your oldest, dirtiest, raggediest clothes you got and come over to the coal yard. I said, what am I going to do, Dad? He said, you just come over there. That's all you have to do. You come over. I'll show you. Okay. Well, I thought that was pretty neat. I was going to go to work, help Dad. So I went over the next day and he introduced me to that coal scoop, number 9 coal scoop. Before that day was over, I wished I'd have never seen a coal scoop, coal car, or a lump of coal. But then that was every day, and on Saturdays all day. And so anyway, when I got 16, I was in, like I say, 8th grade, and the principal's name was Mr. Knoll. He was later superintendent of schools in Louisville after the war. And the visiting teacher's name was either Miss Johnson or Miss Lee. I think it was Miss Johnson. So they called me down in, this was about a month before school was out, graduate. Called me down and said, William, what do you figure? Well, Miss Lee was sitting down and he was sitting behind his desk. And when they called me down, I thought, oh, what have I done now? That's always getting into some kind of stuff. Anyway, I come down, reported Mr. Knoll. He said, William, he says, what do you figure out? So, well, I heard you was going to quit school this year. I said, well, next January I'll be 16. And I said, I'm going to quit. Well, he says, what do you hope to accomplish? What do you want to do when you get out of school? I said, well, I guess I'll just drive a coal truck, load and unload coal. Oh, he says, man, he says, you won't live to be growing man doing that. I said, well, I'm doing it anyway, so I just will quit and go at it full time. I said, I have to work at it every evening. He said, William, he says, you're a smart boy. He says, you get awful good grades. He says, we can't understand it. Miss Johnson and I have talked it over I don't know how many times. And he says, we can't understand it. You run around with Hillary Durrett and Bill Logan and that gang, fighting and throwing rocks and doing everything you big enough, and throwing spitballs in the school and everything. And he says, when the teacher says that you ain't paying any attention to nothing she's saying, and yet she says she's tried to catch you cheating, and says she can't do that. She's asked different ones, and nobody can put, say a cheat. I said, well, I says, what she don't know, a lot of times when I'm acting like I'm goofing off, I said, I'm listening to what she's saying. More than them, it's got their eyes pinned on the Lord. Well, he says, we hate to see a brilliant student like you go to waste. So I'll tell you what, we decided that we would send you to college. If you go on to high school and make it through high school and go to college, we'll get you a student loan fund, send you to college. 2 to 4 years. And I says, well, I don't know how my dad would figure that out. Pay attention. How Dad would accept that. We said, you ask him. And he said, let us know. And he says, get away from that gang, Hillary Durrett, man. You'll be going up to going to a different school over on Broadway. Anyway, he says, you'll be in a different school, and says, we're going to try to separate you and them other boys. I said, okay. I said, but I'm pretty sure my dad will want me to quit school and help him. Well, I said, find out. So maybe we can work something else out, get you on welfare. I said, oh my God, I said, I know he wouldn't go for that. He said, how do you know? I said, well, you can ask Miss Johnson there, she can tell you how he fussed about her giving me clothes to go to school. And she said, that's right, Mr. Noel. He's a proud man. But he's a drunk man. Most of the time. Anyhow, I don't know if I asked Dad about it or not. When I come back, they sent for me again, and I told him no. He said I needed it home more. And if I'm not mistaken, Miss Lee made a trip over several times, because one time she went and Mom was too drunk to talk to her. She went back again, told us telling her about this. And I knew how Mom was. She said, well, you'll have to ask his dad. He's the boss.
Yeah.
Well, he was working, and she couldn't spend all that time running around, so when school was out, I was out. I quit.
You quit and went to work full time.
Yeah, and then when I was 17, I went in CC camp.
CC camps.
Went to Utah.
CCC camp was Civilian Conservation.
Civilian Conservation Corps, yeah.
Civilian Conservation Corps. What kind of things did you went to Utah, you say?
Yeah.
And what did you do in Utah?
Well, we built roads, we built corrals. I guess that's it.
How long were you in the CCC?
I stayed out there a year. And I come home, stayed 6 months, and then I went back in. I went down Utah, stayed there 6 months, signed up for another 6 months, and hopped the freight and come home and forgot about it.
Forgot about the CCC. What did you do then when you got back home?
Tried to hunt something to do. Things was kind of rough. Still wasn't nothing, no work. And I was trying to get a work job on a steamboat. But that CCC, now see, that was practically the same as welfare. You had to go through the welfare department to get in. So, but they gave me $30 a month. I got 5, and they sent 25 home. First time. Second time, they gave me 8 and sent 22 home.
To your family?
And that kept them all going. It boozed it up for the whole month.
Would they have ever given you all of it? The money?
What?
The CCC.
No, what they'd have done was throwed me out if they knew that it was being wasted. And yet there was guys in there that their parents were well off. And their parents would turn around and send them the money back to them.
So you came back to Louisville, and when did you finally go into the Army?
Well, Sackett's Fuel Company started up there, going pretty good. The old man Sackett died. His wife's brother took over, and he bought all new trucks and some cars for the salesmen, and one pickup truck. And I went to work down there with unloading cars, whatever they had to do, storing coal. I never did drive a truck for them, but then in between they get slack, I went to work for Lowell Coal and Coke, driving a truck, hauling coal. Then there's one time wasn't nothing to do, so I was down at Henrik Stabler Tar and All with Hoagie Hibbs. Oh, he come by the house, that's what it was. He said, "You gonna work today, Willie?" I said, "There ain't nothing to do. I done been over there. Nothing shaking at Sackett's or Sliders or Louisville Coal and Coke either." He said, "Well, would you want to walk out over to Henry Stabler's?" I said, "I'm going to get me a job." I said, "At Henry Stabler's?" He said, No. He's going to write me a letter to this guy. He's a ward healer. He run a funeral home out on Chestnut. Camel Chestnut, I think. Anyway, we went. I said, "Yeah." So we went over and got a letter from Stabler. He sealed it up and told us to take it by this funeral home. And so we went out there, and this guy read the letter. I used to know his name. He was a pretty big, high Democrat, or had pull with the Democrats. He was in the party some way. Anyhow, he told his secretary, he says, "Hon," he says, "as soon as you get a chance," he said, "write these 2 boys a letter to Mike Colvin out at the city yards and tell him to put them to work, that they're good Democrats. So I'll see you boys later. Good luck. Shook hands with us. And I says, we got on out, got the letter, they had to seal it up, and we got outside. I said, I'd like to know what that says in that letter. Hogan said, I would too. I said, you notice he said, write that letter to give both of us a job? Oh, Hogan said, oh yeah, but he's only meant me. I said, okay. So we went on out to the city yards. We went in the office there where Mike Collins stayed, and he was there. And he said, what can I do for you boys? And we told him. This guy that was funeral director and Charlie Stabler sent us out there to go to work, see about going to work. And there's a bunch of other guys around in the office, and he didn't want to get out how he was operating. So he had opened the letter and he read it. He said, come on outside. So we went outside waiting for anybody to hear us. He said, if I put you guys to work, he says, are you going to vote Democrat? I said, oh yeah. He said, you old enough to vote? I said, oh yeah. He said, what about you here? Yeah, we're going to vote. So they sent us up on the tree. Well, Hoggy's old man was, what did they call them? You know what, they had wards, and they still have.
Yeah.
And he was a leader
ward
in it.
kind of councilman or ward committeeman or something like that.
Yeah, they had. Anyway, it don't matter. But anyway, we got to working on the sewer district. That hole was 9 and 10 foot deep. And Hogie would jump up or get on a ladder and get up and sit on the side of the ditch. I said, Hogie, want to rest? Get down in here. I said, where the boss can't see. Oh, he says, that don't make no difference. Hell, he don't care whether I work or not. I said, okay, have it your own way. He said, come on up and sit down. I said, no, I can rest down here. I had them long handle shovels, you know, I put my foot up on it. Stand there like I was getting ready to get a shovel full and kind of keep my eye out. Anyway, they laid Hoagie off. Old man Hibbs, he went and he tried every way in the world to get me fired. Because Hoagie got that. He called me over. He said, Willie, he said, how come Hoagie got fired? I said, he just wasn't worth it shit. He wouldn't work. And he even called out there and told me he guaranteed he would work if they had put him back. And they wouldn't. I called and said, no, I don't want that boy. He ain't worth a pound of lead going to hell. He's a dumb. Well, Henry Stabler was talking to him. Henry said, well, what about this other guy that went out there with him? He said, now that guy I'll keep from now on. He said, did you know he's not old enough to vote? He said, no, but he can get votes, his dad and all of them. And he says, he's a good worker. And he said, we got to get something done, and I'm keeping him. So that made Hoagie and the whole shebang mad at me. And so then I run into Keith Justice. He was in uniform. But what had happened, I asked Dad, I said, Dad, I was giving him $15 a week board, and I was only making $18.35 or $75 a week. And I was giving him $15 board. I said, Dad, if I give you all of my paycheck for the next 3 weeks, I said, can I have the fourth one to buy a car? Car? You don't need no car. I said, well, I said, Dowie Clark's got one, and I said, it's a beauty. And I says, I told him what he wanted for it. I don't think he wanted $15, $20. It's a pretty look, about a 32 model Chevy, a lot of chrome on it, and then wheels on each side with chrome on them.
Mm-hmm.
Them little vents, chrome vents on the side.
Yeah.
Chrome radiator. Boy, it was a pretty. In the back end, had a trunk on the back. Boy, I fell in love with it. Freewheeling, everything. So he walked behind with me and looked at it. He said, okay. He says, you give me your next 3 checks. I said, counting this one? He said, yeah, we'll count it. 2 more. And he says, then you can have the 4th. I said, okay. So I was good in my. I said, now I got to have enough to get some cigarettes out of this. Well, he says, you can get it at Charlie Rouse's. I said, well, can I get a carton of Golden Grain smoked tobacco and 2 packs of wings? He said, yeah. Okay. They was 10 cents a pack of cigarettes, and Golden Grain was 50 cents for, I don't know. It had either 10 or 15 sacks of tobacco in it. I think it had 10 sacks. Anyway, for the next 3 weeks, I give him a full check. Didn't take a penny. And he did give me a quarter one week, 50 cents the next. That was about all I had. But money, they didn't even have much back then. Well, it did. 50 cents was a whole lot.
Yeah.
So when I come to get my Saturday to get the car, a dang fool, instead of going on over and giving Dowie my full check and him giving me it would have left me $3 to buy gas and oil with cigarettes. Instead of going over and getting it, I went home. And here was Dad standing in the middle of the floor, staggering around in the middle of that room. Blood all over his head, where somebody knocked him in the head when a nigger took his money. He had made that deal. Well, he said, I got bad news for you. You're going to have to put off getting that car. He says, I lost my money. I said, Dad, you promised me faithfully, and I lived up to my end of the bargain. And I said, I think you should let me get that car. What do you want, to sleep outside the rent stub or the blah? I check and throwed it at him. Take it and stick it. I went out of the house. Boy, I was never so damn disappointed in all my life. I told Dowie Clark, I said, well, Dowie, I ain't going to be able to buy that car. I said, why not? He said, I've been holding this thing for 4 weeks now for you, Willie. He said, I can't go any further. I said, the old man is up home. I said, the niggers knocked him in the head and rolled him for his money. And he insisted I'll give him the check, and I gave it to him. I said, so if you can sell the car, sell it. He says, I already go up there and kick the shit out of him. I said, no, I wouldn't do no good, Dowie. He said, well, I'll hold it another week for you. I said, no, I don't know. If you can sell it, you go ahead and sell it. If you still got it next week, I'll buy it. He said, now you're sure that's the reason? You're telling me straight that's the reason that... I said, that's it. He said, I'm going to hold it next Saturday. I said, well, all right. So the next day on Sunday, Saturday, I run into Keith Justice, and he is all like that in his uniform. I said, where'd you get that monkey suit? He said, well, I'm in the Army. He said, I've been in since July. But he got to tell me about what it was like. And all that. I said, you know what? I think I'll go down and join myself. I said, the only thing is, you got to be 21. I said, or have mom and dad sign it. Well, he said, hell, get somebody else to sign it. I said, well, if they him and mom refuse to sign, I will. That's what I'll do. So I got them to sign the paper. I went on a Monday. I got up Monday morning, mom fixing my lunch. I said, what are you fixing that for? She said, for your lunch. I said, ain't no need, I ain't going to work. Well, why not? Where are you going? I said, down, join the Army. I ain't signing you in no Army. I said, well, I'll get somebody to forward your name. She said, well, you'll have to. I said, Dad'll sign it. She said, no, he won't. Anyway, I bought some whiskey and got him drinking, got him signed.
How old were you?
He well, that was in September, and then I had until January, I'd been 21.
Okay, so you were 20.
20, yeah.
20 years old, been about 19.
Almost 21.
Almost 21, so that was 1940. So you joined up in the Army before Pearl Harbor then? You were in...
Yeah, I told you I was regular Army.
Right. But I mean, you joined before the war broke out.
Yeah, before they started drafting.
So what did you do before the war?
I just told you.
Well, I mean, you said...
Hustling coal.
No, in the Army. In the Army. You joined up in before you were 21, and then the war, you didn't go to war till the end of 41.
Yeah, but I went first, when I first got in after I got out of the troop drill, which only lasted 8 weeks.
Where was your boot?
Fort Knox.
Okay.
And after 8 weeks, they turned us, turned us to duty. Well, then we was allowed to mingle with the regular Army boys. We was considered part of the Army then.
You still stayed around
Before
Fort
that,
Knox?
we wasn't, huh?
Did you still stay around Fort Knox?
I was stationed there.
You were stationed there? Did your paychecks...
27 anti-tank battery, 27 field artillery.
Did you keep your money, or was that still
Well,
at home?
sure. I was my own man. Once I signed in that Army, I was my own man. I was responsible only to Uncle Sam.
Mm. So your money, you kept it. It wasn't going back to
No.
you. So you were in the Army, and then eventually the war broke out in the end of 41. And when did you go to Europe?
42. I went to Iceland.
Oh, that's right. That's right. You talked about Iceland the other day, and you spent some time in Iceland.
Spent
Because
a year.
did you go to England now before the invasion?
I left Iceland and went to England. And I got, they shanghaied me out of my outfit because they figured, all the guys that they thought that would kill an officer,
Yeah, I
their
recognize
own
that.
officer,
Right.
they wanted to get rid of. They were scared shitless of us.
That's right.
I was the first one they shipped out.
To England.
No, I was shipped out to another outfit in England.
In England. Okay. Now, when was D-Day? When was
June 6, 1944.
44? 44. So after that,
The
then
war
you were
was over in 45.
45. So after D-Day, they landed. You eventually were sent on to Europe, right?
On D-Day, that was Europe.
No, I say after D-Day, after the invasion. Then your units would have, because those were mostly on D-Day. That was air cover and boats landing.
It was everything they had. They
Yeah.
had better had a little. They could have used
Well,
a little more.
Were you there on D-Day, or was
Yeah, HR.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So your job
driving a tank.
You were in a tank, okay.
Well, sometimes I'd swap off with the guy. I'd get tired driving. I'd swap off with either the assistant driver, the gunner, or the loader.
So were you in Europe from D-Day till the day it was over?
Yeah,
VE
and
Day?
I was still fighting 8 days after it was over.
Why?
We didn't know it was
Didn't
over.
know it was over. Okay.
The Germans didn't either, and we was in the back country.
Well, after the fighting stopped, how long did it take before you were sent
It
home?
was over on the 8th of May, and I was sent home on the 28th of May.
My gosh, that was fast.
Well, I'd been over it 3 years.
But I mean, they got people out pretty. They had an occupation force though for a while too, didn't they?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they took a lot of the guys right straight out of Europe, sent them
To the
bypassed
Pacific?
the United States, and went, took them on over to the
Pacific.
Pacific because they thought they was going to have to invade there, and if they had, they'd have needed every man jack they could get.
Now you stayed. I don't know the whole. I don't remember the whole story. You stayed in the army though. After the war, you had some intentions of maybe being a lifer.
No.
No?
When I got back to the States, I landed at Norfolk, Virginia. They took us right off the boat, put us on the train, sent us to Camp Patrick Henry, processed us, sent us up to Camp Atterbury, and 2 or 3 days later they discharged.
Okay, you were discharged. Okay. Then you signed up again. When?
That was in 49, I think.
Okay.
I got out in 45.
What did you do for that 4 years?
I didn't stay no 4 years. They shipped me around. Signed up for the Air Force. I wanted to go to radio school and then to Air Gunners School. That would have qualified me to be a Master Sergeant. And I've been,
That's okay.
I've had that Master Sergeant rating, and they couldn't have busted me down, couldn't have grounded me from trains unless it was for some kind of serious misconduct. And they'd have had to court-martial me to do that. But they didn't. Instead of that, they sent me out to South Dakota. And I finagled my way into as a transient radio operator. And I liked about 2 weeks of having enough time that I'd have had a transient radio operator's MOS, and they couldn't have grounded me then without, like I say, I had done something real bad. And they shipped me up to Alaska. And then I got graced to get me out through the Red Cross.
What year was that?
Just before the Korean War, it must have been 50.
About 50.
51, whenever the Korean War started. It started right after I got out. That was it. I went to work for the gas company and worked for them for about a year. And I was heading for getting fired for drinking on the job. Anyway, I finally quit. Got drunk on the job and quit. Then I went up and got a job carpentering. And stayed with it. Till I had to retire when I was working for Gas for the Parkers. Building houses while I was down here in Kentucky. Got down in Peoria, I was doing everything but housework. I helped build 3 or 4. But mostly it was on Caterpillar buildings and other big, what they call heavy construction.
Mm-hmm.
So here I sit on my blooming butt. No
Well-
fun, no fun.
Well, you for a few years worked at the park department. When did you?
That was the last 3 years I worked.
And you retired what year?
82.
82. So
March
it's been-
19th was the last. March the 19th, 1982 was the last day I worked. I started treating for this. I thought I'd just be off for a month or two and then I'd go back to work. Didn't turn out that way.
You mean the emphysema?
Yeah.
When did you move from Louisville to Peoria?
I didn't. Not from Louisville. I moved from Los Angeles to Peoria. From Louisville to Los Angeles to Peoria. With a lot of little side jabs.
Side
in
trips.
between.
Okay. But you stayed in Louisville until when? When did you leave Louisville? Would have been about.
Shit, now you're asking me something I can't.
Would have been around the mid.
It was around 68.
Okay.
68, yeah. And I came up here and I worked for Clean Towel Service.
In Peoria.
Mm-hmm. And then I got drunk. Grace, had my money in an account for me and Grace both. And she was using my account to pay all the bills and socking hers in her account at the First National. So I got on a drunk and gone a week. Come back, she had a bundle pack. She said, I'm going to buy you a ticket to Louisville, Kentucky. I said, I tell you what, you throw in a pack of cigarettes and I'm on my way. So she did, and she wouldn't give me the money. She walked me down to the bus station. So I went there and got a bus, went to Louisville, stayed about another year, and then Miss Nelson had that stroke, and Grace come down. Naturally, she called on her one and only.
Mm-hmm.
And me and Mom tried to take care of her, but anyway, she finally, they took her back to the hospital, and Grace said, why don't you come on back up here? I said, well, it suits me. I got to have a home somewhere. I'm sleeping in the barber shop now. Well, she said, come on back up here. I says, but you got to promise me one thing. I said, what's that? She said that you'll quit drinking. I said, forget it. I won't even come up. She says, you can do it. I said, I don't make no difference. I told you a long time ago. I was tired of telling anybody that I was going to quit. Well, she says, come on up and we'll try it and see if we can make it. So I cooked it. Billy Hightower, I was at his house. He took me in the bus station. 1 o'clock in the morning, I got on the bus and came up to Indianapolis, changed buses, and went on up to Peoria. You talk about a slow train through Arkansas, that was. I had stopped at every little spot in the road. And I've got to go to the toilet.
Okay, we were talking this afternoon. We ended up kind of coming up to.
You ain't gonna put that on?
No, I'll show that later. It's filming though.
Okay.
But we ended up coming up to when you came to Peoria and you're working and retiring and so forth. But since this afternoon, you've thought of some other things. You want to go ahead and talk about some of these other things you remembered.
Well, about these sheep lice is when we went up to Uncle Phil's, and there was a barn up there, and they'd go off visiting, and they told me, whatever you do, don't go up in that barn. So as soon as they got out of sight, I had to go see. I come back down, I told one of the kids there, I said, well, there ain't nothing in that barn. And he said, no, I know they ain't. You got them all over you. I said, what are they? What are you talking about all over me? He says, you'll find out. Well, it wasn't but a little while, and I commenced to itching like mad, like it drove me nuts. Well, they got back, well, they wasn't gone long that time. Somebody wasn't at home, and they come back. So anyway, this big fat woman, she says, well, what's wrong with you? I said, I don't know. She said, you went in that barn, didn't you? I said, no, but she knows damn well I did. She said, come on in here with me. I'll fix you up. She took all my clothes off, boiled them, and took me and give me a bath all over and put grease on me.
Grease? Does that kill the lice?
I guess. But that was what I went on about that one. And I got this on here, could not get okay from Air Force. And I think that was because I couldn't tell them nothing about Dad's people.
You needed that to get into the Air Force.
Huh?
You needed that to get into the Air Force.
No, I needed it after I got in the Air Force because...
To get a clearance?
To get a clearance, yeah, getting loyalty. To show that I was loyal to the United States. They wouldn't accept it that I had been in combat for this country, and so anyway, I couldn't land at no atomic base. But this tough first sergeant, my dad, and how that come about, I was talking to a guy, or rather he said to me, this sergeant chewed my rump out. I said, okay, Sergeant. Went on, and some guy was there, he heard it. He says, Jonesy, he says, how is it that you can take all of that crap off of them sergeants? And he said, you don't say nothing back. And I said, well, the reason I don't, I says, I was trained by the toughest sergeant in the whole United States. He said, well, you Army brat? I said, no, my dad. I said, he was tougher than any of these boogers can hope to be. And he was. And then now, here we go back, way back. These people, they wanted to buy Walter. They didn't want Mom to give him to her. And each time she would go to see him to get him, they'd raise the ante how much they'd give.
Spending money. Now that was when they lived. When you said they
In
lived
Akron,
in Akron,
Ohio.
working at Firestone.
Yeah.
But they never did, of course.
Yeah. Now I got stole ears of corn at Irvin's. Well, what happened there? Me and Irvin went over in Croups Field and we stole corn. We packed corn half a night and put it under the porch and just filled it up. My grandma found it and scared her to death. She thought sure that old man Croup would be around over there and have us all locked up. But we all eat the corn anyway.
Is that when you mean when you go to visit your?
This was out at my grandma's.
And then did you eat it?
Yes, we eat it, and they helped. Oh, everybody eat it. Oh, I said that I hadn't seen Uncle Jerry. I saw him when I was in the Army at Fort Knox. I was down at, there's a swag and there's Otter Creek. That's where it was, just at that bridge, Otter Creek Bridge. These two gals was there, me and this other guy, we was in the car, we stopped. I went over and started trying to make it with her, I said, what's your name anyway, girl? She said, something in Divine. And this other one said what her name was last was Divine. I said, do you girls know Jerry Divine? Yeah, we know him. He's our grandpa. I said, where's he at? She said, up the top of the hill. I said, well, I'll walk you all home. She said, no, he'll shoot you. Anyway, we went with these two gals up there, and here Uncle Jerry and the rest of the family sitting on the front porch in the evening. I guess they done that all their life, because when I was a kid and had visited out there, they done that in the evening. They'd sit on that front porch looking to the west, watching the sun go down. So anyway, she said we got there at the gate, and he was just his hands up over there, looking this mean towards me, This girl said, well, this is as far as y'all can come. Said, that's my grandpa there. I said, I don't care if he's a king of England, I can whoop that old man all over this place. He said, boy, are you talking to me? I said, who you think I'm talking to? Your brother? He turned around to one of these boys and he said, Cecil, go in there and get my shotgun. Why, I said, I ain't afraid of your shotgun. I just opened the gate and walked up.
Well, now, were you related to him in some way?
It was my grandma's brother.
Brother, yeah, so you were kind of related to him.
Well, I called him Uncle Jerry.
Yeah.
And anyway.
Did he know you?
Well, you let me finish my
Okay,
story.
okay.
So I walked up and I said, I ain't afraid of you, old man. He turned around and said, Cecil, give me that shotgun. He said, Paul, he says, you should better not kill him. Said, you'll be gone for the rest of your life. I ain't got but a few more years anyway. Give me that gun. I said, would you shoot your sister's grandson? What are you talking about? I said, you ever hear of Charlotte Allen? Yeah, that's my sister. I said, well, I'm her grandson. Oh, you're Dealey's boy. I said, yeah. He said, is this your brother? I said, no, he's just a buddy that was with me. He said, tell him come on up. I won't, the old bear won't keep bothering. So that's the last time that I seen Uncle Jerry. I hear that the last I heard of him, they was living down in Portland. When I was a kid,
Yeah, go ahead.
visiting down to Uncle Jerry's, I put peas in my nose and my ears,
Oh, I think I remember.
and they had to get them out. And they had one heck of a time. They busted my rump for that. And my Uncle Edward's wife's name was Josephine Eichenberger. Now, Uncle Turner, he kept Irvin with him all the time.
After
Till
his
he
wife-
grew,
Yeah.
was growing. But the rest of them, Dealey married this William Abel. I imagine she married him to get a home. And he was well, he's dead now, but he was mean, treated her like a dog. All they had her Dealey for was to have kids and work. And let's see, Georgie May, she got married to a guy, but Georgie May died from having too many kids. I don't know what you call that. She got cancer from it. Then Viola lives in Texas, in Magnolia, Texas. Oh, we used to. You asked if Paul was. That's a blinking.
It just means it's close to stop.
Well, anyway, we put these matches in his pipe. When it would get down to it, it'd blow the packer out.
Who'd you do that to?
My grandpa.
Your grandpa, Allen?
He'd just laugh about it. First, it scared him. He said, "You doggone idiots," or something like that.
Well, go ahead.
My grandma was mean when you got her stirred up. You asked me what kind of woman she was. She was French and Indian. High cheekbones. I only seen her get riled up once, and that was over me. Some old woman was going to whoop me. And my grandma said, "If you lay a hand on that kid, I'll break your neck." Well, needless to say, she didn't jump me. That's it, I guess, for now.
Okay. Okay. What I remember you telling about your friends on the point. Can you remember some of their nicknames? Some of these characters you used to hang out with.
Yeah, there was Snooky.
Snooky. Okay.
Fritz.
Muzzy. Was there a Muzzy?
Muzzy Brown.
Muzzy Brown.
Dowie Clark.
Now was Muzzy any relation to Charlie?
Dad raised Muzzy. Yeah, Muzzy was was a brother to Charlie Brown.
Charlie, the guy that lived near you later on in Louisville.
Yeah.
The guy with we'll have to talk about that someday, about the grocery carts coming down the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Charlie Brown. Toots.
Are these all guys?
Jacobs. Horace Jacobs.
Are these all boys?
Yeah. Them girls, them women wouldn't let them out. Even in broad daylight. What kept them so strict?
They didn't get out to play, huh?
Let's see, there was Boots, Ginner, Jigger, Monk Hibbs.
Monk was a brother of Hoggy.
Yeah.
Did you have a nickname?
They tried to pin one on me. They never could get one to stick. None of them suited me.
What, you referred to yourself, people calling you William. What did your parents call you? What did your friends call
My
you?
dad called me Billy Goat.
Billy Goat? Your mom call you Billy?
I think so. Billy, yeah.
Is that what your friends call you? Billy or Bill or just anything they could think of?
Everything. Mostly cuss words. P.I. was one that they called me. P.I. Oh, I don't. Lord, that's 70 years ago.
Now, where was the point?
Point was on Camel Street and run from the railroad over to the river. There was an upper and a lower, and it run from the railroad to the river, and it run from it run from over on